Good night. Have one time tonight. God is good and God is good all the time. My name is Jill Spirit Divine. I'm here to give you a word on tonight, and the topic gonna be Abraham trusted God promise. Abraham trusted God promise. The law covenant with Abraham. Now just go all the way back to God's plan for the Israelite. And that made history. So this story about Abraham that made a covenant with God. So when he received the gospel and these covenant, God promised great blessing. God promised great blessing, to Abraham and family, his seed. Now these blessings which extended to all to Abraham's seed, are called the Abraham covenant. So this is the first covenant, that God made with Abraham. The promised land. This promised land is just so special. It's a land that God had picked. So where Abraham is called by God to leave his home and go to a place that's unknown. you know. So Abraham, God called Abraham. Then Abraham had to leave everything and stop what he's doing and go to the land what God is showing him. Now see, this is God plan. This is God plan way back then, and when God had to wait 400 years to save the Israelite. So the reason that God chose Abraham, the significance of the covenant is where Abraham became to be the first human rejected false gods in favor of the one true God. Because I know I used to always say, but how come he picked Abraham, and got the Israelite, so all this pieces is just falling in places to me, So Abraham become to be the first human being to reject false gods, and favor God. And that's what God was so pleased with Abraham. And then he called Abraham. He called Abraham and told him, "You're gonna have a great reward. You're gonna be your name gonna be great to the nation. You're gonna be blessed. Everyone connected to you gonna be blessed. So the Jews believe that the covenant between God and Abraham extended to all the Jews. Now, it was the start of the relationship between God and the Jewish people. So they start having a relationship with God also. So the main point of God plan, now this made history. You know, God made this, wrote this plan out, and it was amazing plan. So the main key of this God plan is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know. So when he made this plan out, Abraham already was 75 years old. So God got to put all the details. See, God always in the details. He got to put the details in because Abraham already 75 years old. You know, and Abraham gonna be questioning because God telling him he gonna have all this stuff. He ain't got no heir to leave this stuff to. He said, "Oh no, heir I got is my household, my servant in my household." So God gonna tell him, "Oh no, you're gonna have your own flesh and blood to be your heir." So the main key is Abraham, then Isaac. Then Isaac started getting old. you know. And so God had a third link was Jacob, and Jacob gonna follow through. Jacob got old, but God called him just in time. Tell your children multiply. They're gonna be a great nation. Because when Jacob was a baby, I put that out too. Jacob already was a nation. So he was a big part of the plan. He allowed himself to get old too, because he sat in one spot when he been supposed to move years ago. But they called it just in time, and he still made it for history. So Jacob family brought God's plan to completion. So even though he got old, but they called it just in time, and he made his family. his family was the Israelite, and they complete God's plan. Now, this story comes from Genesis chapter 15, 1 through 21. So the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision, and God said, "Do not be afraid, Abraham. Do not be afraid, Abraham. I am your shield, your very great reward." And I see God telling him. Now, the first thing God telling him, don't be afraid. And the second thing God telling him, you got a great reward. That Abraham don't know what he did, so good that he got all this here going on. God said, don't be afraid. God said, you have a great reward. So now God is telling Abraham, don't be afraid. I'm your shield. God said, I'm your shield. Your very great reward. But Abraham said to the servant, to God, what can you give me since I remain childless? So he figured, I don't have no children, so how can I get all this stuff? So Abraham just this question, so now Abraham is questioning God that he don't have no heir, that he remained childless, because him and Sarah, Abraham already, was 75 years old, and Sarah was already in her late age too. They don't have no children, so saying his servant, he said his servant will be his heir in his household, so now God telling him great reward. Now Abraham will be blessed, he will have many estates, but no heir, so God said no. God said no. He will not be your heir. You know, your son from your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He telling him, you ain't got no child now, but you're gonna have a child. You're gonna have a child. They're gonna have a child. And you're gonna have a grandchild. And that grandchild is the one gonna bring God's plan to life. Gonna bring His plan to completion. So you're gonna have a child, you're gonna have a child, gonna have a child, and you're gonna have a grandchild that's gonna bring God plan to completion. So God have a plan that Abraham will have a child. He will have a child and a grandchild that will fulfill God's plan. So he questioned, he like, how I'm gonna do all this sin? I ain't got no children, but God said you're gonna have a child. Your child gonna have a child, and you're gonna have a grandchild that's gonna fulfill His plan. So then God took Abraham outside. Now he questioned about all this sin, about no children. He ain't got no heir but besides his servant that's in his household. So then God told Abraham, come on outside. I need you to come outside. Look up to the sky. Look up to the sky. Count the stars. Count the stars that's in the sky. And if you could count the stars, your offspring will be there. So he telling him, if you could count the stars, your offspring, you will have some children. You're going to have two. The first one going to be for his maid service, you know. But he was going to make that the heir, but his wife stopped that. So they had to have their own flesh and blood to be the heir, of their essence or all their fortune, their blessing, So after God had told him to count the stars, now Abraham believed the Lord, and he credited Abraham. He believed it, and he credited. He said it to his righteousness. So Abraham trusts God's promise. So when God told him to look up in the sky and count the stars, and all them stars he had to count, you know. So that's when Abraham said, okay, I trust you, God. I trust your promise. Even though he's not gonna have all them children, he's gonna have one for his servant, and he's gonna have one for his flesh and blood. But his grandchild is gonna have the nation. They're gonna produce all the children. They're gonna multiply as a nation. So he still made part of history because he had Isaac. Isaac had Jacob. Jacob had the nation, which is the Israelite. So God had chosen Abraham to be the keeper of his covenant with him, with man. Abraham was to become the father of the nation. So God wanted Abraham to be the father of the nation. Was to become the father of the nation. His deceiving would number the stars that's in the sky. And it sure was. It was so many other Israelites, and they just kept multiplying. Because before Jacob went to east to Egypt, to see Joseph, he told him, tell your children to multiply. He already had 10 children. Tell your children to multiply. They multiplied, and they kept multiplying until they was overflowing. You know, so until they overflowed to a great nation. So his deceiving will number the stars that's in the sky. The custom of this covenant will follow the bloodline of Abraham and Sarah. To make to their son Isaac, the grandson Jacob is the future of the generation. So Jacob is the one that brought it to completion. You know, he had 10 children already by himself. And God told them to multiply, and trust me, they multiplied as a great nation. Because see, Jacob was born. He already was. His name was already written as a nation. So God said, "I am the Lord who brought you out of Chaldeans to give you this land to take possession of." You know, so it's just like He told the Israelite, I am the one who brought you out. you know, and giving you a land to possess. So now God's telling Abraham, I am giving you this land to take possession of. So that's what God telling him. God said, I told you to leave your house, leave your country. You coming to a better country. Because you about to own your own land. You about to be the father of the nation. You about to be blessed. You about to be a blessing to everyone. So that's what God is telling Abraham. Now the first promise, you know, to Abraham that God gave to Abraham, that you will have your own flesh and blood child to be the heir of all of your assets. The second promise, you know, God had told Abraham a great promise, about you and your deceiving will possess this land Canaan. That Canaan land was gonna be the whole land was gonna be for them. So God said, I brought you out. God said, I brought you out. And God brought Abraham out of his old life to his former home for this very purpose. You know. So when God got a purpose for you, God gonna lay it all out. Just like that woman in Isaiah 54. When God was helping and taking care of that woman when she was ashamed, when they were teasing her in the neighborhood and stuff. God had set her up good. Shut all the mockers up. Had her house filled with gold and silver and all that. And that's what God is doing to Abraham. I took you out your old country. I'm bringing you to a new country, your own land. And now he about to have something bigger. God said, I took you out of your old life to your former home for this very purpose. You know. And so now Abraham still asking questions. I don't blame him. He just asking all these questions. Ain't nothing wrong with asking questions. So he asking another question. How would he know when to possess the land? You know, he wants to know how would he know when to possess the land. So God said to Abraham, know for certain that 400 years your deceiving will be strange in a country and not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. Now this plan here is already came to pass. You know, so now we see, because we kept on wondering why God wait till 400 years. This was all in His plan. You know, God had said certainly in 400 years, all your disciples, the Israelite, you talking about the Israelite, was in a strange, would be in a strange country. They was in Egypt, you know, not their own, wasn't their own land. And that they will be enslaved. They were slave under Pharaoh, and mistreated under Pharaoh, you know. And so that's what he's saying. So that's why it took God 430 years to rescue him. Because see, the rest of the Israelite, because it had to follow God's plan. See, God always put all kind of extra details in the plan in case they have a oops and all this kind of stuff in his plan. So he already put the oops and the mistakes and stuff in the plan. He said 400 years, it went an extra 30 years. You know, so we see that he's talking about the plan that the Israelite, uh, Jacob found. So now we see that God planned that we all know it happened, just like He said. I mean, God planned everything happened just like His plan said. He said 400 years. I mean, He went to 430, but He still was close up. Because we kept on wondering why He waited 430 years to save them. That was all part of His plan. So now we see that God planned that we all know it happened, and it happened just like He wrote it. So the Israelite was in a strange country, just like His plan was. He wrote that long time ago, over 400 some years ago. Because he waited 400 to get them. All the while that was in His plan. He said it was in a strong country. The Israelite was in a strange country. They was in Egypt, you know, under Pharaoh. They was enslaved under Pharaoh. The Israelite was being mistreated and oppressed by Pharaoh and his men. So God did took 430 years to save them. God did punish them. He said, back then he said God had punished them. So God did have punished the Egyptians from treating the Israelite bad. Treating them, mistreating them, and oppressing them for 430 years. He said God punished them, and God did punish them because God put Pharaoh and his whole Egyptian army under the Red Sea. So after God did guide them towards their great possession land in Canaan. So after God had put all Egyptians under the Red Sea, so God did all that because there was oppression in Israel for 430 years. You know, they couldn't just get away with it. No, God let them out, and God had still deal with all those men, and all of them was under that Red Sea. So now we see that God plan did came to pass. Because God did punish the Egyptians from oppressing the Israelites for 430 years. He put all of them under that Red Sea. So God also told Abraham that he will go to his ancestor in peace and be buried at a good old age. And we know that when he died in peace. And they took him to where his father was buried at. When they said the ancestor, that was his father. They took him where his father was at and buried him. you know, and wherever he was buried at, they buried his wife Sarah also. So God's saying, you will go where your father in peace. When they had ancestors, they were talking about his father, because his father died before he it was able to see Canaan land, because he was heading on that way with Abraham when God called Abraham, and his father wound up dying. So you were buried at a good old age. So all that was in God's plan. So God already knew, Abraham already was 75 years old when God wrote the plan. So God already knew he wasn't going to survive it. So he had to put Isaac. Isaac got old. So then he had his son. He had the twins, but Esau was the weak one. So Jacob already was the third link in God's plan to follow it through. you know. So God already had all that in His plan, that he gonna die at his old age. You know, and then Isaac wind up and got old and died. You know, so it was left for Jacob. You know, so the land made the Lord made a covenant with Abraham. You know, your descendant, um, I will give this land to. You know, so he already know. He already know. Abraham already 75 years old. So now I'm talking to Abraham and guiding him through his descendants, his family, his genes, his seed. You know, they're gonna get all this stuff. You know, because you already at 75 years old. You know, so God made this plan out. He really wanted this plan for Abraham. But when he came up with the idea, Abraham already was 75 years old. You know, but so it had to be left for his seed, his family behind him. You know, so God made a promise to Abraham. You know, he made three promises to Abraham. The first one, he would give Abraham a child. You know, Abraham questioned him about that. How you giving me all this and I don't have no children? You know, so he said, count the stars. You know, so God gonna give him a child. Promise he gonna give him a child. And two, he promised that land. You know, that land is so special to God. You know, and that land had made history. You know, so three, he will bless. He will bless Abraham and his family. Abraham will become the father of the nation. You know, so he said all this kind of blessings that Abraham gonna have. You know, Abraham gonna be a blessing to the nation. You know, he gonna be the father of the nation. You know, Abraham gonna be all these things before he pass and get too old. You know, so God chose Abraham to be a blessing and a great nation. You know, that's what he had told Abraham. You know, I call you to be blessed and I call you to be a great nation. You know, so three, God favored Abraham. Abraham was the first one to reject false God, and that's touched God's heart. You know, that was the first one. You know, Abraham was pretty much in the early part of right after Noah when he built that boat to save him and his family, and God destroyed a whole nation. You know, and Abraham and his family was still surviving on another land, and that's when God called him in place and been dealing with Abraham ever since. You know, because Abraham touched God's heart when he rejected a false God. That's when was the first kicked off when Abraham rejected false God and favored God. You know, so the main point of God's plan was Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You know, so with God plan, God already had 400 years in his plan. You know, and we kept on wondering why he waited 430 years. You know, but now we see that was part of his plan, that he was gonna let them sit there. You know, he already said in his plan they're gonna be enslaved, they're gonna be mistreated, you know, and then they're gonna leave 400 years later. You know, so all that was in God's plan. You know, all that was in God's plan. I mean, everything had came on point of what his plan was. You know, so with God's plan, God already had 400 years for Israelites to get saved. Jacob was the future to bring God's plan to closure. You know, Jacob's children was the Israelite, you know, who was enslaved. That it did took 430 years for God to save them. You know, so we see that God had put all these details. I mean, excellent writer, excellent creator. You know, because he put all these details. He put all these details in his plan, and every detail he put in the plan, it came to pass. You know, he said the Israelite was gonna be in a strange country. Then they're gonna come back to their own country that I'm giving them. You know, but it's gonna take 400 years for them to come back to the land that I'm giving them. And he true, you know, because he took 430 years to save them, to bring them back to their land. You know, he said Israel, they was gonna, Jacob was gonna. Remember down the line when I had a couple of days ago, you know, God told Jacob, you're gonna the land that you standing on. You're gonna leave this land, but then you're gonna come back. You know, He's gonna come back. So this is the story of preparation of God's plan for the Israelite that made history. You know, and when God had um rescued the Israelite from being enslaved, God already knew He was gonna punish them from oppressing the Israelite. And He did that. That's why He came up with the idea to put them under the Red Sea. He said, your enemies that you see, you will not see them no more. And He made sure of that because it was under that Red Sea. So we see that God was all in the details when He put this plan together. And we see that everything He said in this plan right here, it did came to pass. So now we see why He waited 400 years. That was part of His plan, you know. And we see that He did all this for Abraham, but Abraham couldn't follow through from God. Oh, and we see that was in His plan also. He said He gonna die at an old age. So He knew Abraham was about that time for Abraham. So all the details was in His plan, and it did follow through. So that's all the word I have for y'all tonight. And I see y'all in the next video.